There is a place on Earth where the ground just disappears. Not slowly, not over decades, overnight. You go to sleep and by morning there's a hole where the road used to be, where the hotel used to be, where your car was parked. And nobody can tell you when it's going to stop. Right now along the shores of the Dead Sea over 6,000 of these holes exist. 6,000, and that number is not shrinking, it is accelerating. Scientists who have studied this for 30 years are saying something they've never said before, that they did not expect it to move this fast, that their models were wrong, that what is happening right now was not supposed to happen for another 2, maybe 3 decades. It happened anyway. And what's terrifying is not just the holes, it's what the holes are telling us, because the sinkholes at the Dead Sea are not the crisis, they are the symptom. The real crisis is something far bigger, far older and far more unstoppable, and the world has barely noticed it. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at water differently. The Dead Sea sits between Jordan to the east and Israel and the West Bank to the west. For most of human history, it was one of the most striking natural wonders on the planet. The lowest point on Earth's surface, over 400 meters below sea level. So salty that nothing could live in it, no fish, no seaweed, nothing, and that same salt made you float effortlessly on its surface like you were lying on a mattress. People have been coming here for thousands of years. Ancient Romans, biblical prophets, Cleopatra reportedly had cosmetics made from its minerals. In the modern era it became one of the Middle East's most visited natural attractions. Hotels were built along its shores, spas, resorts. Tourists from Europe, Asia, America flew in just to float in that strange, heavy, ancient water. It was supposed to be eternal. It was not. Here's what nobody told the tourists taking selfies on the shoreline. The Dead Sea has been dying for decades, not metaphorically. Literally, the water level has been dropping at a rate that has no natural precedent in recorded history, 1 meter per year, every single year, year after year after year. Do the math, that's 10 meters every decade. In 30 years the Dead Sea has shrunk dramatically. The famous beaches you see in old photographs, some of them are now hundreds of meters from the water's edge. The shoreline has retreated so far that hotels that were once right on the water now have a 15-minute walk before you reach the waves. And that retreat, that shrinking, that slow vanishing of water, that is exactly what is creating the sinkholes. Here's how it works, and this is where it gets genuinely frightening. Beneath the surface of the land surrounding the Dead Sea there are layers of salt. Ancient salt deposited over millions of years when the sea was much larger. These salt layers are stable as long as they stay dry or as long as they stay submerged in salty water. Salt water doesn't dissolve salt, basic chemistry. But when the Dead Sea recedes, when the shoreline pulls back, it exposes those underground salt layers to something they've never encountered before. Fresh groundwater, rain, aquifer water, water that has no salt in it. And freshwater dissolves salt like a blowtorch through ice. Deep underground, completely invisible from the surface, these freshwater intrusions begin eating through the ancient salt layers, slowly at first, then faster. They carve out caverns and tunnels beneath the earth, hollow spaces, rooms the size of apartments forming in complete darkness hundreds of meters below where you're standing. And then one day, the ceiling of that underground cavern can't hold the weight above it anymore. And the ground just opens up. No warning, no rumbling, no slow crack you can run away from. One moment there is solid earth. The next moment there is a hole 4 meters across and 10 meters deep, sometimes more. Geologists have documented sinkholes at the Dead Sea that are large enough to swallow a truck hole. One opened directly beneath a road while a car was driving on it. The driver survived, barely. But here's what changed recently. Here's what shifted from concerning to alarming, because for years, scientists were tracking this. They had models, they had predictions, they thought they understood the rate at which the sinkholes would form, and they thought they had time. They were wrong. In the last several years, the rate of sinkhole formation has spiked in ways that the models simply did not predict. The sinkholes are appearing faster. They are appearing in places that weren't considered high risk. The underground dissolution is happening at a pace that suggests the freshwater intrusion has reached deeper salt layers than anyone expected, which means the problem isn't slowing down as the salt near the surface gets consumed. It's speeding up as it reaches more salt below. One researcher, speaking to journalists a couple of years ago, said something that has stayed with many people who heard it. He said that they used to think of this as a problem for the next generation to manage. Now they are not sure it is a problem the next generation will be able to manage at all. Think about what that means. Scientists who have dedicated their careers to studying this specific phenomenon are revising their timelines downward in real time. The disaster is ahead of schedule. But there's something even darker underneath all of this, literally underneath. Because the sinkholes are terrifying, yes, but they are pointing to something that goes far beyond the Dead Sea itself. Why is the Dead Sea shrinking? That's the question nobody wants to answer, because the answer is not comfortable. The Dead Sea is fed primarily by the Jordan River. The Jordan has been flowing into this basin for millennia, replenishing the water that evaporates in the brutal desert heat. It's a closed system, but it was a balanced closed system. Water in, water out through evaporation, level stays roughly stable. Then humans intervened. In the 1960s, Israel completed the National Water Carrier, a massive engineering project that diverted water from the Sea of Galilee, which is the primary source of the Jordan River, and sent it to Israeli cities and agricultural land. Jordan, on the other side, built its own diversion infrastructure. Syria did the same with tributaries further north. The Jordan River, one of the most historically significant rivers in the world, a river mentioned over 200 times in the Bible, a river that has flowed for millions of years, was reduced to a trickle. In some places, in some seasons, it barely reaches the Dead Sea at all. The Dead Sea is not dying because of climate change alone. It is dying because every country surrounding it took the water that fed it and used it for themselves. Agriculture, cities, industry. And nobody stopped to think about what would happen to the lake at the end of the line. Now they know. And here is where the story becomes not just a regional tragedy but a warning for the entire planet, because the Dead Sea is not unique in what is happening to it. It is extreme. It is dramatic. It is visible. But the process that is destroying it, human overextraction of water from river systems, combined with rising temperatures accelerating evaporation, is happening to bodies of water all over the world. The Aral Sea in Central Asia, once the fourth largest lake on Earth, was reduced to a fraction of its former size by Soviet irrigation projects. It is now a desert with rusting ships sitting on dry sand where the water used to be. Lake Chad in Africa has lost 90% of its surface area since the 1960s. The Great Salt Lake in Utah is in crisis. Pupo Lake in Bolivia essentially disappeared in 2016. The Dead Sea sinkholes are not a freak geological accident. They are what happens at the end of a long chain of human decisions, the final consequence that shows up when the accounting finally comes due. And here's the twist that should make your stomach drop. The freshwater being diverted from the Jordan River, the same freshwater that is now seeping underground and dissolving the salt layers and creating the sinkholes, it is also running out. Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority are all competing for a water supply that is shrinking due to climate change and overpumping of aquifers. The groundwater levels across the region have been falling for decades. Wells that used to hit water at 30 meters now need to go 100 meters down. Some villages have lost their wells entirely. So you have a situation where the water that destroyed the Dead Sea is itself disappearing. The diversion projects that killed the Jordan River are now struggling to deliver the water they promised. The agricultural systems built on those diversions are under threat. The cities that grew to depend on that supply are facing rationing. Everyone took from the same system, and now the system is collapsing, not in some distant future, now. There have been proposals to save the Dead Sea. The most ambitious is a canal project that would connect the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, pumping water across the desert to refill the dying lake. It's been discussed for years, decades. There have been feasibility studies, international negotiations, press conferences. It has not been built. The estimated cost runs into billions of dollars. The political complications between Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority are enormous. Environmentalists have raised serious concerns about what pumping Red Sea water into the Dead Sea ecosystem would do. The two bodies of water have completely different chemical compositions, and mixing them could trigger algae blooms that would fundamentally alter the remaining Dead Sea in ways that can't be undone. So the plan that could save the Dead Sea might also destroy what's left of it in a different way. Meanwhile, the sinkholes keep opening. Hotels along the Israeli shore have been demolished, not because they were old, because the ground beneath them became unsafe. A beach that was a tourist hotspot, a place where families came on vacation, where children swam in the shallows, was closed permanently after sinkholes began appearing meters from the water's edge. The ground simply cannot be trusted anymore. There are roads in the region with sinkhole warning signs posted every few hundred meters. Imagine driving on a highway knowing that the earth could open beneath you at any moment, knowing that the hollow spaces are down there, growing, invisible, waiting. That is not hypothetical for the people who live and work along those shores. That is daily life. Farmers who have worked the same land for generations have watched their fields become unmarked minefields of collapse risk. Agricultural land that was viable a decade ago is now abandoned, not because of drought, not because of war, because the ground itself has become unreliable. And the acceleration that scientists are now documenting is not expected to slow down on its own. The freshwater intrusion has reached salt deposits that are deeper and larger than the ones closer to the surface. There is more fuel for this process underground, not less. The dissolution will continue, the caverns will grow, the collapses will increase. The geologists who study this are measuring new sinkholes now with a frequency that, even 5 years ago, would have been considered a worst-case scenario. It is no longer the worst case. It is the current reality, and they are revising their worst-case projections upward to account for what they're actually seeing. Some of them believe that within the coming decades, if nothing fundamental changes, if the Jordan River is not restored, if the water diversions continue at current levels, the Dead Sea will not be recognizable as the body of water that humans have known for millennia. It will be smaller, saltier, shallower, and the land around it will be riddled with collapse zones that make it effectively uninhabitable. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, a natural wonder, a place that has existed since before recorded human civilization, functionally erased by engineering decisions made 60 years ago that nobody thought to reverse. But this is the part that will not leave you. This story is not finished. There are children alive today who will grow up to see what the Dead Sea becomes. There are engineers right now drawing plans for infrastructure projects in the Jordan Valley that assume the ground is stable. There are governments with budgets already stretched thin, with political crises already consuming their attention, who have not yet fully reckoned with the scale of what is coming. The sinkholes are the ground sending a signal, a very loud, very visible, very hard to ignore signal. The kind that, in the movies, would be the moment when the scientist bursts into the government meeting and says we need to act right now. But this is not a movie, and the meeting has not happened. There is a photograph that geologists have been passing around for years. It shows a stretch of land near the Dead Sea's southern basin. In the background you can see the water. In the foreground a flat, seemingly ordinary piece of ground. And dotted across it like craters on a moonscape are dozens of sinkholes of different sizes, some new and sharp-edged, some older, their rims worn smooth, all of them dark, all of them open. The people who took that photograph stood at the edge of it for a long time. Then they went back to their labs to update their models. Because the numbers, they said, keep coming in worse than expected. And they always will, until something changes. Or until the ground decides it is done waiting.